and understanding that you really do have something to offer. And here's another big one was I realized that when you're in the letting yourself get lost in the moment of frustration and fear, you have no ability to acknowledge what you've actually accomplished already. Being on a stamp, Henry the Sixth, working with Sam Mendes, traveling the world, oh, none of that comes into play because I'm so fixated on what I've lost out on. And when you start to acknowledge that that's what you're doing and that you're negating what you've actually done to get to this point, you start, that's what I mean about realizing you're good, acknowledging that you've actually done a lot to be here. You've actually succeeded a lot to be here in this moment, already. Doesn't matter about that thing you think you should have got. You're here now for a reason. There's a reason why you got into that room and missed out on that thing. And that's when you start seeing the positives in the negatives also.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. I'm blown away by this chat. Chukwudi has done the work. He shares profound wisdom, empathy, secrets of the universe, as well as compassion. The list goes on. He has an amazing story filled with highs and lows and an even more beautiful philosophy on balance and acknowledging and thriving with our emotions. He's also very humble, super deep and philosophical. I could listen to him talk all day long. It's really awesome to hear how he's managed and thrived through life's ups and downs with such a powerful and positive mindset. It's a real treat. Anyway, I'll stop raving. Let's get into it and officially introduce Chukwudi to the podcast. Chukwudi Iwuji is an award-winning actor as well as a writer. An extraordinary actor both on screen and stage, Chukwudi continues to captivate audiences with his versatility and establish himself as one to watch. He recently made his debut in the Marvel Universe in James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, starring as the main villain, High Evolutionary. In 2022, Chukwudi made his debut in the DC Universe, starring as Clemson Mern in the DC Comics and HBO Max series Peacemaker, also from the mind of James Gunn. Additional television credits include BBC drama The Split, Michael Morrissey's The Girl Who Got Away, as well as the Emmy-nominated Amazon limited series The Underground Railroad for director Barry Jenkins. Other television appearances include When They See Us, Designated Survivor, Quantico, The Blind Spot, Madam Secretary, and Doctor Who. His additional film credits include the Netflix feature Shine Your Eyes, the thriller Daniel Isn't Real, Netflix's Barry, John Wick Chapter 2 opposite Keanu Reeves, A Woman Apart, Now in the Wings, A World Stage, the multi-award-winning Exam and Fault Arise. As an accomplished theatre veteran, Chukwudi starred in Othello for the Public Theatre's Shakespeare in the Park, as well as Antony and Cleopatra, King Lear, and Hamlet. His performance in The Low Road earned him an Obie Award, as well as a 2018 Lucille Lortel and Drama League nominations. An associate artist of the prestigious Royal Shakespeare Company for his numerous Shakespearean performances, he's also received 2 Olivier Awards for his role as Henry VI in RSC's 2009 production of Parts 1, 2, and 3. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, such as the cycle of highs and lows, having his own stamp, the benefits of meditation, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, working hard at our emotions, fear, payoffs, signs, and guardian angels. Before we get into this chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I find it adds a new element and dynamic to these chats. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny and Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out every Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the video to follow the following day. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's epic episode. This could be a great way to start the podcast. You know, you've had a lot of success in recent time. I'd love to know about your number one success in my mind, and that's that you're now on a stamp, I believe. Please tell me about that.
Oh, the stamp. Yes. Well, I played Henry VI at the Royal Shakespeare Company between 2006 and 2008, and this amazing company put together by Sir Michael Boyd, and we did the whole history cycle, and they were a huge hit. They really reinvigorated the history plays for Shakespeare. And then lo and behold, I believe it was 2008, I got a call from my agent saying, just Royal Mail have just gotten in touch, and you've just been approved by Her Majesty the Queen to be on a stamp. But she has to approve all the stamps. I was there for a limited series. I was on a stamp. I think it was I want to say a 78p stamp or 59p stamp. I have it somewhere for my grandkids and all that, like an open box of it somewhere. And yes, I am on a stamp in the UK. It's so funny. I always forget that people bring it up and I go, oh my God, I'm on a stamp. Yeah. It was a commemorative. It was 50 years. I believe it was 50 years or something of the Royal Shakespeare Company. And to commemorate that, they made some stamps, and I was one of the actors that they decided to put on the face of a UK stamp.
Isn't that crazy? Like, who would have thought that the career, when we'll get into it in a bit, that would lead to that opportunity? I would have bragged. I would have told all of my friends. I would have been at parties and dropped it. Oh, what's this?
You know what? I haven't bragged. I'm too modest sometimes, because you're right. I should be bragging about that a hell of a lot more. Do you know what I mean?
I expect you to.
My manager has a framed stamp of me in her office for people to see when they walk in. So she's even bragging about it, and I have mine locked away somewhere in some closet. It's so weird. But that's just me.
You're too modest, and I know you're modest from looking into and doing the research, but if I had a stamp, I would have in every room a stamp. I'd have
blown up versions of it.
Yeah, that'd be the first thing you see when you walk into your house. It's very exciting. When you received it, what was that like when you first saw it? Because it's a bit out of the realm of being an actor, for example.
Yeah, do you know, when these big things happen to me, I have this sort of weird, I spend hours of my life and days of my life and every day meditating to have that, that state of being able to observe, remove yourself and observe.
Yeah.
When these big things happen, I find that I go completely into that without even thinking about it. It's like my superpower. Oh. I just have this ability of like, wow, I was observing me look at a stamp, but sort of removed from the immediacy of it. It's the same thing when I was watching Guardians in the theater. It's the same thing when I was, there's this sense of watching it. So I do remember the stamps arriving. I remember telling people about it, but I don't really remember having this, oh my God moment. It's sort of like I'm looking at this thing going, wow, that's crazy, maybe it's my way of dealing with stuff like that. It's almost too big to
comprehend,
sort of grasp and comprehend. Yeah.
I think you're doing yourself a disservice. I know that you're a meditator and you've been meditating for a while. It just sounds like, and I know you're humble and you're gonna say, oh no, but that's kind of, I've been meditating for probably about 10 years, and that's the goal, just to be able to observe and go with the flow, and that's mastery stuff. So I would imagine after your many years of doing this, it would kind of keep your ego in check.
It does. I mean, look, I'm sure with many of the guests you've had, this is such a roller coaster ride. And I remember around when I recently moved back to New York around 2016, I had your classic roller coaster from a real up to a real down to another real up. And I remember saying to my then girlfriend, now my wife, going, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep, even the highs are too high and the lows are, so that's when I sort of went back to all the Eckhart Tolle and all the stuff I'd read that were talking about equanimity, because I realized that's the only way of getting through this. But in general life, that's why they write about it, but specifically for me through the profession was demanding that I find a way of not going the full extent of the emotions, to calm down and stuff, to find a way of enjoying it, enjoying it, just going through it with equanimity, I guess. So when these things happen, that's my go-to place.
Oh, that is so. I bring up meditating all the time, and I'm sure
Hmm.
people don't want to hear about me meditating all the time, but I love it when I hear, especially when you talk about that roller coaster, because there's
Hmm.
highs and lows in this career, massive
Yeah,
highs and lows, and also in life. So, did you discover it in, I think you said 2016, or had you dabbled
yeah.
in it before?
I mean, look, I've been experiencing the highs and lows my whole life, certainly my whole career. There was something about 2016. I had literally gone through, I don't want to name the projects because it'd be really crude, but a couple of projects where I'd been so close, so close. And I went, of course, I didn't get them and I went really down. But it was also the year I did Hamlet, which is the single greatest role I've ever played and the only
Oh,
role I
nice.
would ever return to. And experience the high as a creative and as a person, uh, uh, connecting with these audiences, whether it was in Rikers prison or homeless shelter for women, or bringing it back to the public theater to perform there, or in a high school. Like I'd experienced such highs with this character. And I just got news about something I was going to go do, which was amazing, which was to finally work with Evo Van Hove in Hedda Gabler. I believe that was 2000, summer 2000 into 2017. Yeah. And I was like, oh, what's going on with me? I was just feeling down a second ago, and now I'm up and I'm whatever and all that. Oh, the year started with me flying to Rome to do John Wick 2 with Keanu
Oh, wow.
Reeves and Coven and filming in Rome. And then the down came and stuff, and rubbish back when we were that was sort of like the end of pilot season, rubbish pilot season, missing out on stuff. I was like, what's going on? And I just said, I can't do this anymore. I've so many years of my life have gone by me not being aware,
Oh,
just
interesting.
being lost in the emotion of highs and lows and fear and excitement and relief, just being lost in the emotion and not actually taking stock. It just hit a climax in 2016, and I said to Angela, I can't keep putting you through this, and I don't want to keep putting people I love through it, and I'm certainly not going to don't want to keep putting myself through it. So you have to find a way of navigating it. So that was that year. That's what made that year specific.
It's so interesting, but also kudos to you is that often when we experience such a wide range of emotions, we can sweep it under the rug, we can go into negative direction, which we see all
Hmm.
the time, but to actually tackle it and admit that something wasn't perhaps working for you and actually do something about it. Like meditating can be quite hard work just to sit
Yeah,
in the silence and deal with the emotions. That's overwhelming. Every single person I've
yeah,
spoken to, including me. So to actually tackle it is very brave.
yeah. It came to a point where it wasn't about choice anymore, because that's what I had been doing for most of my life, sweeping it under the rug. You forget you went through that, and you repeat the cycles constantly. You're just repeating the cycles of how you deal with stuff. I remember a friend of mine, my dear friend, his mom is a therapist, and we've been best friends since we were in college, and they're like my second family. And I remember it was a rough time. It was when I first moved back to New York, and there was a pilot I had shot that didn't go. And it was just getting to the time where I hadn't worked in a while, and my savings had come over from London with were running out. And it had started so positively, and then it didn't work out. And she said, and he said, come to Cleveland. They live in Cleveland. Come to Cleveland. Get away from it. Just come get away from it and be with your family here. And I sat down, and she took me into a study to have a sort of unofficial session. And I told her what had happened, how, yeah, the pilot didn't go, and then I was working, and now I'm not working, and I'm looking for work, and I'm waiting for the next job, and I'm a bit anxious, and the usual stuff, and what am I doing? And she just looked at me and went, okay, so you were working, you had a great time, then the job ended, and now you're looking for work, and you're of course worrying about the next one, not sure when the next one's going to come, you know. And then she looked at me and went, so what's changed? That's been your entire cycle as an actor. You work, you don't work, and another job comes. You wait. And she just looked at me and went, "What's changed?" And I remember that being a point that probably, and that was 2013. That was probably the beginning of me. It takes a while, as you know. It took another 2.5 years for
It
me
always does.
to decide. But that was probably the beginning of someone finally saying to me, it's never going to change. That's always, whether you're at this level or that level, whether the last thing you did was a Marvel movie or play off Broadway, it's always going to be you're working, then you're not, then you're working, right? And you're wondering what the next thing will be. Even if you have a couple, two, three things in a row, there's always going to be that period where that's done, and you're like, well, what's next? So that was the beginning of thinking of it in terms of this is the pattern, this is the structure, this is how it works.
I love that because
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole journey. Everyone I've spoken to, whether it's on the podcast or off the podcast, when we think we need to meditate, for example, or do something just for our own health, it can take a while. And it's encouraging to hear, you mentioned that it took 2 years, but there was still work
Yeah,
that you were doing. The pieces were kind of going along. And
yeah,
something I heard you say elsewhere, and I would imagine this is a credit to just you and working on yourself, is now a good day for you is reading a book and drinking coffee or tea. And I would
yeah.
imagine that's a big shift from where you were, what you just mentioned now, to what's going on now. And that takes a lot of work to be able to just appreciate the day, because every actor, whether you're a writer or whatever, and you don't have work, the fear, I need to be working, what am I doing? And
Mm,
for you to be able to enjoy just sitting back and reading a book, I think that's pretty remarkable, because this can be an industry of fear, and you're constantly looking to the future of when am I going to get that next job?
absolutely. I think a big payoff of this industry is when you can allow yourself. We have the luxury of not having 9 to 5s, 5 days a week, 50 weeks in the year. So the payoff of this day is when you can work, and when you're not working, actually enjoy the fruits of the fact that you've just worked and something's coming out. For me, that's a big payoff for me. Is that actually I can't wait to get home to my family. I can't wait to be back in my place reading a book, or to go into my favorite coffee haunts after I've done a gig, sometimes in a different country, sometimes in a different state. I can't wait for the in between times when you just go, everything's okay. You're gonna work. This is time. The preciousness of not for me. The reason I'm an actor is I had the option, as you know, if you sound like you've done a lot of research to
Yes.
have
Yale
quote
University.
unquote a real life
Yeah.
economics, whatever. And I would have been perfectly happy and perfectly fine doing that. But it's not what I wanted. And a big reason why it wasn't what I wanted is because I envisioned that kind of life versus the sort of life I wanted, and it didn't match up. And I go, well, there's something great about being able to go to the gym at 10:30 in the morning and not 6 a.m. in the morning before work. There's something cool about saying, hey, let's meet up, and it doesn't have to be between the hours of 1 and 2 on your lunch break. You can meet at any time. And I think part of everything is yin and yang, and there's a real balance, right? And I think when it's going good for artists, it really is quite amazing when it's going well. And the balance of that is that there's a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of not knowing what's next. And that's the payoff, is that when it's going well, you can really relax in this way. That's how I see it.
It's very interesting. I did what you did. I have a commerce degree, majored in accounting and management, so I became an accountant. Left that, I'm now pursuing
Wow.
screenwriting and obviously doing this as well. And you talk about, you could have been reasonably happy. There still would have been
Mm,
some, knowing you from what I've seen, there still would have been something you that would have reached that like fulfillment. And maybe that's an ever chasing goal, but there's just something within you that obviously kept you going. And I
yeah.
look back in my previous life, and I just wouldn't have been happy. So
No.
was that the case with you? Because, going to Yale, top
I
school.
I
Yeah.
I'm quite I remember when I was deciding to take up the offer for scholarship in drama school in Milwaukee, and I was going to finish my degree at Yale. I remember a phone call came in from McKinsey consulting firm, and one
Oh,
of my
wow.
one of my professors, one of
I
my
don't know that.
professors at
Yeah.
Yale, yeah, my professor at Yale, um, Dr. Ryan, what was Ryan's last name? Schneider, Ryan Schneider. taken up, big position there. And I guess he passed my name on to HR or something because I didn't apply to McKinsey. I
Oh,
remember a phone call, and I remember a phone call coming in from them just saying, could you send over your resume? Basically, just formality, get your resume up because
yeah.
come work for us, basically. And I remember just saying on the phone, thank you, ma'am, but I'm not going to because I'm going to drama school. And there was a long pause on the phone, and the woman on the phone just went, you know what? Good for you, sir, she said on the phone.
No
And I remember
way.
that was just one of those precious,
Oh my God.
beautiful moments where a perfect stranger, and in like 2 weeks later, it was random. I was at the gym, the Yale gym, and there was a guy working out because they used to open it up to low. You could get membership even if you weren't at Yale or if you were an alumni or so. And there was one of these guys, the dad that was an athlete but hasn't quite let go of being an athlete yet.
Yeah,
Guy
I love it.
working out, like really
Yeah.
work. And we're coming, and we got to talking. We got to
Oh,
talking, and I might have been spotting him, and he was spotting me or something. And he was talking about he had this. He could have. He was a baseball player. And I remember we were talking about it, and it came up what I was going to do, drama school, and he took a pause, and he just went, you know what? One of my biggest regrets is maybe I could have made it in the major leagues as a pitcher, maybe, but I, I was too scared. And this was within 2 weeks of each other experience. Life throws. That's the awareness thing. Life throws out these guardian angels. If you're going down the right path, the universe has a way of throwing out these guardian angels that say it's okay, especially when you're going down a challenging path. Those things happen within a couple of weeks of each other.
wow. How awesome is that moment when a complete stranger, one, just for people that don't know, McKinsey is the top management consulting firm in the world, and
Yeah.
people die to get that job. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like it's a big deal in that world. And for you to have
Yeah.
the courage to say it's not for me, and then to hear that lady,
Say, good for you, sir.
yeah,
And
beautiful.
also I knew I would have been moving to New York. I'd have been a stone's throw from Broadway. So every day, possibly from my office, I'd look out the window and see what I really wanted to
Yeah,
be doing. And I was like, I can't do it. I can't lie to myself that that's what I would prefer to do. But it wasn't easy because think about, you're graduating from college at 21-year-old or whatever, and you're going into McKinsey, you're sort of set, you know what I mean, at those times.
the life.
So it wasn't easy. It
Yeah.
wasn't easy.
Well, you could see, exactly, well, life's unpredictable and there's beauty if you allow it in, but you would have had a rough idea what your life would look like. And here,
Yeah.
it's very different. And it sounds like from what I've seen as well, we've got similar upbringings in the sense of, I think your parents were supportive, but they did economics and I think they worked for the UN and they're all about, which is very similar in my upbringing as well, like to be successful, like doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Or
Oh, so that's over in Australia also. Is that the case?
oh, I would say more from my Jewish upbringing
All right.
and my
Okay.
and my
Yeah.
community. It depends.
Yeah.
Australia's wide ranging, and the I was talking about there's so many people, and it excites me that when you say life's looking easy because parents want you to be safe and protected. They know you're going to earn good money. To say, you know what, I'm not going to take this. Because that can be very scary, especially when there's a certain expectation as well, and you're a young
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. Well, it was an amazing, and again, another amazing, which is why when I look at how things are working out, you just go, it was always supposed to be this way. Yes, my parents being African parents, there's only three professions: a doctor, lawyer, or an engineer. Anything else is a hobby, right? And
My parents are South African, so
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, all right, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So when I was growing up, I did economics because my parents did it, my older brother did it, I think my elder sister did it. It's such a great philosophy. Do you know what I mean? It's such a wide-ranging, elastic way of improving your mind as something to study. You can do historical economics, you can do, predictive economics, you can do the math economics. There's just so much of it. I did it because I didn't know what else to do. I just felt like this would give me a grounding to make up my mind. So, and then of course, Yale happens, and at the top of the pyramid, as it were, with economics, it's really set up for corporate law or finance, whatever you want.
Yeah.
So I was very nervous to tell my parents because of how, what education meant in the family and our culture in general. And it took me a whole semester between being offered the scholarship to drama school and telling them.
Ah,
But yeah, I was just nervous to tell them. I was like,
yeah,
but eventually I did, and I wrote it. It was in the days of airmail letters. I don't know if you remember those blue, thin
yeah,
letters. And this was before FaceTime or Skype. So I wrote them a letter explaining how I had finally found something I want. It wasn't just that I could do it, but that I actually wanted to do. Most of what I had done, whether it was sports or whatever, they were all things I just happened to be good at. It's not anything I really wanted to do. That was the same with economics as opposed to acting, that I go, I don't even know if I'm good at this, but I want to do it. And it took a few weeks, and finally a letter came back, which is again stored in the same area as my stamp. A letter from my dad saying, all we ever wanted was to give you the best opportunity. And now as an adult, you've found what you really want to do. So we're going to support you 100-fold because this is now your life to live. And that was one of the moments my parents surprised me in a way. Parents do that.
yeah,
Parents really do that. When they love you so much, you think you know exactly. Usually you do. But for those crucial things, those things that matter, when they know it matters to you, they surprise you. And from that moment on, 100% support for them. Without them, I don't know how to have survived drama school. Dirt broke, you know what I mean? And all
yeah,
that. They supported and they made sure it happened. They were always there with, whether it was money turning up in my account when I needed it in my first few years in London, or the words of encouragement or the words of prayer. They're very religious and they're driven by faith, faith that really counts. They were always there. So yeah, it was hard to tell them, but when I told them, I realized I could have told them straight away because they surprised me.
that is beautiful. And
Hmm.
I would have been tearing up, and because obviously you've
Yeah.
kept that letter,
Oh,
and then
I wept. I just wept. I looked at this letter and wept. It was like you were meeting your parents for the first time. It was really.
what you gave the example of the guardian angels, and our
Mm,
parents are angels as well, and that's another moment
mm,
in your life where someone's kind of giving you the all clear to continue with your path. Is it something
mhm.
that you are very observant of? You're obviously very spiritual, and you mentioned faith, so I'm not sure if you're more religious or spiritual. It doesn't really matter. Is that something that you look at and
I,
feel? And
I'm very spiritual. I'm inquisitive as far as faith goes, but I'm more spiritual. I'm sort of encompassing of the whole thing and the bigness of it and the God that is inside you. That's the
uh,
best way I can put that. That's the best way I
yes,
can put it.
yeah,
So I
very
do look
faith.
out for signs. Like when those signs happen, I definitely acknowledge them, and I make sure I tell at least one person about it because I want it to be codified and real. Um, uh,
Interesting.
yeah, because I don't want it. It's like, there's so many ways we could discount them as just pure chance. Or sometimes I even look twice at deja vu and go, is it deja vu or is it something I saw? Because I do believe life is more cyclical than a straight line in general. So
Yep.
I do look, I don't go chasing signs, but I think I'm pretty receptive to them when they present themselves. For instance, the most recent one is a job that is coming up that I can't talk about yet. But I remember I was in the gym and I was listening to a song. God, I wish I could remember it. I wrote it down. I can't remember. But the song title is something, Your Life is About to Change or something. It's the title of the lyric. And I was listening to the lyric. Um, and you're in the gym listening to the lyric. I was like, oh, I don't often listen to lyrics. I'm more of a guy that just listens to the sound of the music as opposed to knowing lyrics. And then I looked at my phone and it was a message from my agent saying, can we all get on a conference call today? And I just knew it was a job, coming through
Oh,
because I was like, that lyric, those signs like that are very, I really don't take them for granted. And my mom passed away in 2009, but there are moments I really feel her and I'm aware of that. And yeah, and dreams, like my family are all my sisters especially, and my brother actually, they're very into dreams because my mom was like that, of signs and messages coming in through dreams. So I really listen to them when they have them. And when the few times I do have them, I really pay attention to them in that sense. So yeah, there's so much going on in this universe. We're more tapped in than we realize, and everything we talked
Yeah.
about meditation, whether you go through it with prayer or whether you go through to meditation or you go through ritualism and stuff, it's all about us trying to get tapped in again, more tapped in. But we are. So these are little signs of, I believe, little signs that I do pay close attention to. And I always make sure I say a gratitude, thank you to the universe. And after everything happens, because something is happening. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay. I want to pigeonhole the gratitude because I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't actually that familiar with gratitude, but a few people have
Mm-hmm.
been bringing up in the last few years, and it's been a bit of a game changer. But it's
Mm-hmm.
so interesting. For me, I was very stubborn. I wasn't open to this stuff. I thought it was ridiculous, and this is how the world is, very linear. And, you know, I believe in belief systems. So if that's what my belief system is, that's how I'm going to perceive the world. But then I was very lucky to have some mentors and people to tap me on the back and push me in a more forward, positive direction. And it's
Yeah.
just like we know nothing about the
Nothing.
universe, and it's so exciting. And since I made the decision to leave accounting, my life's been magical in the sense.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's not always perfect, but I'm so grateful that that I had the courage to make that decision. And even just on the meditation side, and um, I think I've written like 5 or 7 scripts for meditation. I didn't like of
Mm.
concepts I didn't even know. And that might seem a bit weird to some people, but just clearing the space and allowing for nothing, you can receive so much. And hearing friends and other people, not even just about meditation, just about living your life and trying to do more good than bad. And just sitting down and getting a movie. I'm about to finish a movie I've been writing for
Mm.
a while. And that came purely from meditation. And I didn't even
Wow.
know what I was doing. And I was just so grateful. Or I'm even grateful if like look, I do this very small amount, but I'm trying to keep myself more accountable. But in terms of gratitude, being grateful for inverted commas a negative experience or a positive
Yeah.
experience has made
Yeah.
me so much more positive. I
Yeah.
rarely have bad days now. And that's
Mm-hmm.
partly because of the meditation, but also the gratitude. What did that experience teach me? Sometimes it's hard to do it in the moment, but it looks like you've
Yeah.
got something.
Well, I try. Sometimes it's harder to
Yeah.
do than there's certain negative things that happen that are easier to say, okay, what's the positive than others.
Yeah.
But it's a practice. It's almost like you have to fake it till you make it. I think you have to sort of tell yourself to say I'm grateful before you actually feel grateful. You just say it. You try it. Even if you're laughing at yourself doing it, saying, "Who are you fooling? Who are you bullshitting?" Do
Yeah.
it, and do it enough times, and it becomes a habit. And then you internalize it, and then you start believing it. Because a lot of these practices they actually work outside in. People think it's all inside. It's actually about sitting down. Meditation is the outside action of sitting down, and it doesn't matter how well it goes today, but just sitting down and then coming back the next day and doing it and doing it, and then
It
it starts to
amplifies.
settle. And I think it's the same thing with gratitude, especially when looking at gratitude for negative things. At times I go, "Who are you fooling? You're not grateful." That jerk just swore at you in the subway.
Yeah.
You think is it, but if you just find a way of telling yourself that, faking it almost, till actually you are. And I've found that recently, a couple of situations where I've been really annoyed when it's happened. I just need time to sit down and think, okay, first of all, it's not as bad as it seemed. It's dealable, and you can learn a hell of a lot from it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because then you go, the ability to just say, okay, this will never happen again is a big thing. To learn from something and just go, that mistake wouldn't be made again is a big thing. It's a growth thing. Because till that happens, you're likely to make that mistake at any given time, right?
I've got 2 examples that spring to mind. And it's also like they say when you're hammering a nail in, that once you
Mm-hmm.
hit your thumb, you're never going to do it again because you've learned from
Yeah,
it. And
yeah.
I briefly spoken about this also on the podcast. I'll keep it very brief. I had a TV deal which I was really excited for, but ego clouded me, and I thought this is going to be, you know how this game works.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to be the creator of my own show. This is going to be my big break. Blah 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 blah. And I was clouded. Eventually, seeing some, I'll just keep it brief, some red flags and communication styles that weren't working, and a lot of ego and just something that was not in alignment in what the project was, and the project didn't go ahead. In the moment, I was upset, but then literally the next day, I was so grateful that I didn't sign on because
Mm-hmm.
that would have been a disaster. The show wouldn't have worked. Who knows if I would have even retained my IP, all these other things. And it's something I'm quite proud of myself for figuring this out, but just in the context of this example is, that wasn't necessarily a good outcome. I didn't get the TV show. I can still get the TV show later on.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it was a gift that I didn't sign because you could see the writing on the wall. And I'm sure like
Yeah.
with acting, for example, where you think you really wanted the role, then maybe you see and you go, thank God. Yeah. Yeah.
Constantly. I was just going to say that you've nailed. I mean, even, when I think of, my career feels like it's had two phases, before James Gunn and after James Gunn,
Oh, interesting.
and yeah, because he's changed my life. But when I think of the gigs I thought I wanted, that I was being seen for leading up to Peacemaker,
Mm.
I mean, a couple of those were like down to the last two, and I'm not sure I even wanted them, but they were gigs, they were work, they were high profile. It was that. When I think that if either of those had worked, I would never have met James Gunn. I wouldn't be talking to you now about Guardians. I wouldn't be talking to you about. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah, I love it.
those things that I saw at the time as, oh, letdown or disappointment because they didn't work out. Damn, missed out on that one again. They only cleared the path for me to be available, to have done Peacemaker. And you realize that's constantly the actor's life. You don't, it's like the song says, you don't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes you get what you need. Is that the lyric?
Yeah, yeah. I love it.
And it's always, all my siblings always say to me, even my dad, they always go, it's so funny when you allow yourself to get disappointed with things you don't get, because if we're not mistaken, the jobs you end up landing are usually more fruitful for you than the ones you missed out on. So why not keep trusting that? That's what I mean about not getting into that pattern of up and down. It's just go with it. Trust that it's gonna come, in that sense.
You have a very, very unique perspective. I found this quote of yours. I've been thinking about it, and it's
Mm-hmm.
very impactful for me. But I know there's layers within it, and the journey of an actor. We've spoken about it. Sometimes you get a role, doesn't turn in. A yes can turn into a no, or you wait, you never get the call, or something.
Mm.
It's a talked about ups and downs. It's just like a
Mm.
real whirlwind. I didn't say that very well, but this is your quote, and this is about booking jobs. If it's yours, it's yours. Otherwise, there's nothing that you can do. And that blew my mind for a little bit. I'd love to know what that means to you and how you came to that conclusion.
My dad is a big part of it. My dad has always said to me, what is yours is yours. Is a very, and that comes again very much from faith, in the sense that when it's ordained for you, you're going to get it, But he's always said to me on a practical level, what is yours is yours. Is no one can get in the way of it, and even you yourself can't get in the way of it. And I've found that in jobs, is that I've walked into a room with jobs that are, in my head, they're me. This is easy. I'm going to book this. Like, they'd be lucky to have it, and not booked it. And then I do, to use the recent examples, I do a one take of a very short scene, thinking, oh, I'm never going to, for Peacemaker, thinking, I'll just do it because it's so well written, it's funny, let's have a blast. We do one take, send it up, not expect. And then James Gunn looks at it and goes, who the hell is this guy? You know what I mean?
Yeah, crazy.
Or when I think of, oh yeah, talking about the stamp, let's talk about the stamp, Henry VI. I went into Henry the audition for Hotspur and another role. Good roles, but not the title roles. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in the middle of the audition of doing Hotspur, Michael Boyd stopped for a second, looked at me and said, "Do me a favor." And he reached out, got a book, and said, "Read this for me. Do this." And I opened it, and it was the monologue, Henry VI. The Molehill speech from Henry VI, Part 3. And to tell you, to put this into context, this was 2006. In 2000, I had had a conversation with my brother who passed away in 2001 from complications of surgery about how a certain David Oyelowo was playing Henry VI on the Royal Shakespeare stage and was the first black actor to play king on the Royal Shakespeare stage.
Oh.
And he was saying how things are changing for black actors in London. I was in the US at the time. He said, maybe you should think of coming back. And I made a promise. That was the last full conversation we had on the phone before things happened. And I said, bro, yeah, I think I'll come back. Fast forward, literally, from when I moved back in 2001, 5 years to the day I moved back was when I was sitting in that audition room. And the director gives me Henry VI. And I remember him saying, do you need a few minutes to go outside? And because I've just thrown this speech, I said, no, I've got this.
Oh, wow.
I knew I was going to get the part. That part was always going to be mine. And that's what I mean. And suddenly I went from coming in to play a good role supported to playing a role that changed my career. And I knew it was mine. I couldn't get in my way. I didn't need 10 minutes to prep it. I was able to do it, cold read, and nail it because it was always mine, And I've had auditions where I've gone in and been awful. And they've called back and said, yeah, you got it. And that's what I mean is that we think we can control all that. And if it's both frustrating and also releases the pressure valves in a weird way, but it's frustrating because you have actually so little control outside of doing your work preparation. Yep. But it actually releases the pressure when you just go, look, if I'm supposed to get this, I'm going to get it no matter what. It doesn't matter if I walk into the room and see my nemesis A-list, whatever, who's been booking all the roles. This is the one I'm going to get if I'm supposed to get it, And that's what I meant by that, is that even I couldn't get in my own way if a gig is meant for me. And at the same time, if it's not meant for me, I could have the best audition of my life. The director could be my brother-in-law. My uncle could be financing the project. But if it's not meant for me, there's nothing I can do to get it, And when you know that, and conversely know that if it is meant for you, Daniel Day-Lewis could walk into the room and still not get it because it's meant for you, that it's going to be yours. So there's a way of relaxing into that. If you can get rid of the control factor, wanting to control everything,
Oh, okay. I've got so many questions. And also, I imagine it's different to theatre because theatre, as you gave the example before, now anyone can kind of play the role and they're not like pigeonholing you into certain respects. And there's so many examples of where, someone had a role, but they're like, they're too small compared to the lead cast or their eye color.
Yeah.
Things that I'm not sure would happen in theatre. I'm not well versed there, but I would imagine.
No, they happen in theatre. They happen in theatre, yeah.
But just things like that. And, although that sounds incredibly frustrating, going back to your mentality where it's not really about the eyes, the role just wasn't for you. And I'll add, you are, and I'm not trying to suck up to you, are very talented. So the hard work gets you to a point, but it's more about letting go. So is this something that you've applied for a while, or is it something that you've really honed in the last couple of years or whatever the time frame may be?
Oh, no, it's around the time of, there's this period like sometime between 2013 and now that I actually started waking up of trying to understand how one gets through this and finds equanimity and some kind of peace of mind. So something I've honed, definitely honed in and I've worked on, because you try to understand why, when I mentioned working with Eva Van Hove, and I have the great thing about it is I always have empirical evidence to show for it. You know what I mean? It's like, when I worked with Ivo Van Hove, the first time I auditioned for Ivo was for his production of The Crucible. And it was a great audition. And I got a call back and came in, and I was sure I was going to get it. It was great. I mean, it's just great. Didn't work out. And that's when I went down that spiral. That's the event, that spiral that I talked about where I said, I can't keep doing this to myself. That was the event. I was like, I'm done. You know what I mean? But I remember him saying to Heidi Griffiths, the wonderful casting director of the public, saying, but I really like him. I'm going to work with him. And you've heard that a million times as an actor. And you go, yeah, whatever. They're just making me feel. And then it was literally, uh, you know, within a year of that, he's back and he's casting Hedda Gabler. And I don't know whether it was my agent or who reached out first, but he said, like, he's in New York for 24 hours. Can Chuck come and just have a sit down with him, cold read? It's not really an audition. We met in the New York Theater Workshop in a room and cold read for Edgar Gabler. We read, it was fine and stuff. And I knew everyone was going after that role. Like big names were going after, movie people were going after that role.
Oh, nice.
And he gave it to me because it was as much as our chat as it was from doing the Crucible audition a year or two or whatever before that. You know what I mean? And that's how this industry works, is that, again, that's the perfect example of it's not like I read brilliantly for Loveboard. I mean, we were in a room, there was a lovely reader there, and I was just reading it cold. It's not that, but he'd seen enough from before that he was like, that's the combination I want, you know?
That's so beautiful, and it's also rewarding in the sense of it might not work out for you, but if you show up and you deliver, who knows what can happen.
Yeah, your job when you audition isn't really, people think it's about getting that job. It's not about getting that job. It's leaving your footprint, leaving such a strong impression on the casting director, but even on the director who might not cast you, to just go, I'm not casting this person, but they're bloody good. You need to make them wish they could cast you, whether they do or not, is the gig.
That's a very unique perspective. I also want to dive deep into this a bit further. I know we've spoken about it, but this period, you can go as deep as you want. But obviously, you talked about the highs and lows and being able to mentally deal with it. You talked about meditation. I'm not sure if this was the same time, but I think you were a bit down in the dumps and you received an offer for a show. I can't just fill in the gaps. And you didn't want to do it, and your agent actually gave you advice and said, if you don't want to do it, don't do it, which is very rare.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember this example? And I can give you a bit more details that.
Yeah.
Do you want me to?
Can you give me more details?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So there was a moment of difficulty in your career, and there was a job opportunity, and you didn't have any work, and really didn't want to do this role, and your agent actually said, "I believe in you. You don't need to do this if you don't want to." And I thought that was
Mm-hmm.
pretty empowering because one, I'm not saying all agents like this. The agents want you to work so they can get money, but for someone to
Mm-hmm.
also tap you on the back and say, "I believe in you. You're going to be fine." Do you remember
Mm-hmm.
that example? Is this in the same time frame?
I'm trying to think which production that was. I remember my agent at the time, Teresa Hickey, telling me that for something, yeah, and specifically saying to me, I believe in you, even if you don't right now. Do you know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was yeah, this was ages ago. This was in London. This was before that time frame when I was going through a dump, and it was really beautiful to have someone say that because, like you say, agents, when you think of the basic denomination of an agent is to book, book, book. I've been very lucky that my agents, I'm no longer with Teresa, but for 20 years, she was someone who was about what do you want? And I'm lucky that my agents now are the same thing. There isn't that sense of, they're very specific with what I do. And it comes down to, Michael, it comes down to the sort of actor you are. What I would say to everyone is make sure that when you're signing up with an agent or manager, make sure they understand the sort of actor you are. Make sure they don't just see you as an actor. And I've been very lucky to have people who understand the actor I am, who are able to tell me, don't do that job, even though you think you want to do it, because it's not you.
Yeah.
And other ones who say, I know this, but trust me. You know what I mean? You need those sort of agents. And I'm very lucky to have that team around me. But I remember it was for, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, after I'd done the histories, and I was pretty, those were huge shows. Michael Boyd made stars of all of us, theater stars anyway, of all of us, And I was offered a Macbeth out of town, Sheffield Crucible, I believe, was when this job happened. And I love Macbeth. In fact, I'm now looking to do a Macbeth, hopefully. And but it was right after I'd done 2 years in theater. It would have meant going off to Sheffield, it was never going to be the experience I just had with the RSC and with Boydie and stuff. It was a desperation job. It was a job that if I took, and I'm not saying Sheffield is a beautiful theater. I mean, it was a great production, but it wasn't the right job to do at that time.
Yeah.
I wanted to do it because I was terrified of not working. When actually she knew there was other things we should be doing. Now that you've done the histories. And she was right, because after saying no to that job and not working, going back to I think I was working sales at Kenneth Cole's shoe shop. Like working at, within the next thing I got was Sir Richard Eyre invited me to do a workshop out of the blue in the National of a show called The Observer. That began my relationship with Sir Richard Eyre, and we did The Observer at the National. We did Welcome to Thebes at the National. I did the King Lear film with him, with Tony Hopkins, Florence Pugh, Emma Thompson and stuff. That was the beginning of we did this thing with William Boyd, the Three Soldiers with Riz Ahmed on TV. That decision not to go off to Sheffield and stay and trust and do what is right for you led to one of the most productive, beautiful collaborations of my career so far.
There's these themes in your life of where you know, whether it's starting acting or saying no to economics and McKenzie, or the examples that you gave, or saying no to a job and something else happens. I love hearing stories like that, because often I'm a firm believer of this, that when we make a decision that feels right for us and we go against the fear, because pretty much fear is running in our head all the time, we just allow space for something to happen. Whether something happens or not, at least we've made the change in our mind, or to say that, I actually made a tough decision and I'm proud about myself.
Yeah, it's not just in our work, it's in our relationships. Think of breakups, and in the whole history of breakups, there's never been a breakup that someone hasn't gotten over in the whole history of them. However traumatic that breakup is, whether you realize it or not, you do move on, and I feel it's the same thing in our careers, is that fear. I mean, Paulo Coelho talked about it when he talks about the warrior of light, it's all about
I've got one.
not being, you've got to, his books are great, The Alchemist, though, and
yes.
it's about the warrior of light. It's like, you don't lead with fear. And also you said it perfectly. How do you allow room for what is supposed to be yours if you're constantly trying to hoard yourself with stuff that isn't supposed to be yours out of fear, And when you think of relationships, people stay in relationships or seek relationships or go for relationships out of the fear of being alone. The problem is if you're with someone that you're not supposed to be with, but you're holding on to because you're afraid of being alone, how the hell does someone that you're supposed to be to find the space to move into? So at some point you have to be a warrior of light. You have to be able to jump into just jump in head first and not know what's going to happen and trust something's going to happen, as opposed to convincing yourself this is what should happen,
Analytically, it becomes a lot harder to allow for that space. But Warrior of the Light, I love that word.
Yeah.
That's actually a similar title to the movie I was just talking about that I've written as
Wonderful.
well. Very similar. So I want to just go back to this period, because the few years of period of where you had to make a few changes. Can you tell me a bit more about what you did? Like, meditation is already huge. Acknowledging your emotional state, absolutely huge. It also can be rare for us males at times. There must have been, first of all, to do that quickly, I'm very proud of you, but you must have done like some intense things, or was it kind of like, this is what I'm doing, this is my path, I want to see things differently?
No, I think I just embraced that a bit, like getting over any sort of substance abuse or stuff, that you're just going to embrace the fact that you could fall on any day, and every day you succeed, you say a prayer, like, you know what I mean? You just get on with it, and you watch yourself. Part of the very first thing about meditation is watching yourself, right? You watch your react. I started being more aware of my reactions, and I started being more aware of how I think about things. That didn't mean that I didn't get sad or disappointed or annoyed, that I, or frustrated. But you now know that these are all things you can come out of. Do you know what I mean? If you want to, when you're ready. That's the thing. It's knowing when you're ready. Are you done being angry for a while? Are you ready to come out? Okay, now you can come out of. That's a big thing. A big part of it was honestly, and you mentioned you had a girlfriend. Was my partner is like meeting someone who I want to be better for. Do you know what I mean? Because they are inspiring in the way they live life. She's very open and generous. One of the things that I struggled with in that period was not feeling like every job that went to someone else was taken away from me. That sort of envy.
Yeah.
She's the most generous, open, genuinely is happy for success to those she loves,
Hashtag shared
cares about
success.
shared success, and understanding that concept that it's envy is feeling there isn't enough for everyone when there
Abundance
actually,
mindset.
is. Yeah. And so I learned a lot from her and wanting to be better for her and to be open and be more like her was a big part of it. But a big part of it for me was just day to day, like watching it happen. And I'm glad I started this process before, shall we? It's easy to do this stuff when stuff's professionally going well, right? It's
Yeah.
easy to not hang up on a job when you got another gig. You know what I mean? I'm glad I started this when it was still uncertain, because as things have sort of picked up and got whatever, you're sort of removed from it. You get it. You get that it's just another version of 6 years ago. It's just another version of it. You still need to do the same work to deal with it now, sometimes even more work to deal with it now. Now there's a thing of expectation. Now there's a thing that you've experienced the high. How you have now higher to fall if you're going down there, So I think it was just a day-to-day working on it. There was no sort of seismic event or whatever, apart from learning and knowing when I fell and knowing how to get up and keep working at it. And I guess if there was a shift, was you have to ultimately believe that you're good,
A
that
good person.
you're a good, not just a good person, but you're good at what you do.
Yeah.
We're talking professionally here, like, because when I think of my life, the stuff that has caused me most aggro has been the career. I've allowed the career to cause me the most aggro as a person.
Yep.
Than anything else, because my life is actually pretty damn good, and that's part of the meditation, realizing how much good you have. But I've allowed this thing I do to fluctuate my moods, So the good thing I'm saying is understanding that you're whether you got the job or not, or whatever you know your craft, you're good at what you do. You've worked at this. And it's their loss.
I like that. Yeah.
What do you tell yourself to understand that it's not? I've been on the other side of the casting table, actually. I remember when I did Othello here in the park, and they said, okay, can you come in? And we're down to our last rounds of Desdemonas and Amelias, and can you come in and read with them? And it was extraordinary to watch for 3 hours talent walk into that room. Any one of those actors, any one of them could have been a great Desdemona or a great Amelia, any one of them. But a decision has to be made. It can be only one. A bit like Highlander, there can be only one that gets it. And that doesn't negate how good everyone else was. And understanding that in myself, and understanding that you really do have something to offer. And here's another big one was I realized that when you're letting yourself get lost in the moment of frustration and fear, you have no ability to acknowledge what you've actually accomplished already.
Yep, definitely.
Being on a stamp, Henry VI, working with Sam Mendes, traveling the world, none of that comes into play because I'm so fixated on what I've lost out on. And when you start to acknowledge that that's what you're doing and that you're negating what you've actually done to get to this point, that's what I mean about realizing you're good, acknowledging that you've actually done a lot to be here. You've actually succeeded a lot to be here in this moment, already. Doesn't matter about that thing you think you should have got. You're here now for a reason. There's a reason why you got into that room and missed out on that thing. And that's when you start seeing the positives in the negatives also, you know.
Oh, that is beautiful and empowering. Okay, there's so much to say there, and seeing the positives in the negatives that's the goal for me. And you talk about not the pain within the career, but hearing your whole story and just being self-reflective like you are, it sounds like you're way less hard on yourself and you understand a bit better than perhaps the average person, which you'll never admit, but the flow of the universe. I would imagine now that you've got Guardians of the Galaxy and you've had huge success, especially in the theater space, but Marvel, for example, there's more eyeballs. That's probably the best way to say it. I would imagine that you're a lot more equipped to be able to deal with that success. Like you gave the example of the stamp where you're like, this is cool, but you didn't let your ego kind of get corrupted, which is very natural. So I would imagine, I'd love to know how you feel about this. Potentially, if you got the Marvel role, if it existed 10 years ago or 15 years ago, you may have not been able to deal with it with how you've been able to deal with it now. Do you ever think about that, or like the ego side?
I do. And that's part of the growth thing is that, oh my God, if I got the Marvel role 15 years ago, acting in my head was my life. I was an actor. That's it. It's a beautiful romantic thing young actors do to themselves. Artists, not just actors, young artists. I'm an artist. This is what I do. If I'm not this, I don't exist, right?
Yep.
And it's bullshit, So 15 years ago, I would have been lost in that, right? Terrified of what's coming next if it isn't another big Marvel tentpole thing. And that would have been me 15 years ago. And that's, but me now is the gratitude meditation. I've done it. I've had this experience. How lucky, how brilliant is that? It's understanding what it took to get here, which is very different. Understanding, what I understand most now is how easily it couldn't have happened.
Interesting.
How easily. I didn't want to audition for Peacemaker, which was James Gunn's first collaboration with me, because I was like, I'm never going to get it. It's going to go to Lance Reddick. You know what I mean? It should go to him, the late great. Yeah. And as it happens, I think James said to me that he was the first one they offered, but he couldn't do it. So they auditioned for it.
Were you thinking
and
that
I almost didn't. I was thinking that. I was like, I know who's going to get this, because I've been around long enough, and he should get it, because it's that cynical, dry, whatever. I almost didn't do it. Now, what would have happened if I didn't do it? What would have happened if, even when I was doing Peacemaker, if COVID hadn't happened, if James didn't have time on his hands to write Peacemaker, I wouldn't have met him there, and I wouldn't have done Guardians, because if COVID hadn't happened, he'd have already filmed Guardians 3. No, I'm not saying that COVID is a good thing. Don't get me wrong, please, your listeners don't do it. But I'm looking at how all these massive events, seismic events that have nothing to do with me were happening. And because of them, I got a chance to meet this man. And then I go, well, it's ridiculous to think that I'm in control of the journey that brought me to. There was nothing I couldn't have planned, mapped out 5 years ago. How do I finally get into a Marvel movie?
Yeah.
But here I am. So I guess the fact that it's happening to me now, and because of the way I think about life, makes me observe it. I'm observing from outside. I'm observing this wonderful moment. I'm having a moment, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm observing it. But it's a moment, and I understand it's a moment. I don't know what the next moment is. What I do know is that this isn't me in entirety. This is a moment in my life, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm lucky to have it, and I'm grateful to have it, and I've worked hard to have it. But it's not like because I did this, I got this. No, all these other things happen that I'm not in control of. And there's something that lets you let go at that point and look forward to the next thing you're going to do. Yes, you should have a sense of where you want to get to. Don't get me wrong. As Hamlet says, I'm deeply ambitious, but ambitious in the right way, because I realize it's the difference between 15 years ago and now is then it would have been all about the career. Now I understand the career is this wonderful, I'm lucky that I love what I do, but what I do isn't all that I am. And whenever the career works out and things like this happen, it's for that enjoying of the moment that it is. And the joy it gives to those around you who've watched you work hard. And ultimately, that step closer to fulfillment so that you can enjoy the rest of your life, which is what matters. And how that fits into the building block of enjoying the rest of your life. It's not about the gig. It's not about the job. It's about how that job fits in to making your life happier. And that's the difference. You know, does that make sense?
Yes, I think you're a yogi. You've done a. I'll be very interested to hear what books you've read, because you've got a beautiful. You're a rare human. You know, we'll wrap it up, but to see the world in what you see, and to talk about the highs and the lows and how you've wanted to grow and improve, and ultimately figuring out that the career is not the entire thing, even though we're artists and there's a huge part of us. I think it's really profound, especially with the success that you've had, and just very empowering to me. So I'm very grateful that we had this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we go, how can people follow you, keep up to date with you, and all of that cool stuff?
Yeah, I'm learning all that stuff. Well, I'm on Instagram, so my handle is Chukwudi _Iwuji on Instagram. I don't do Twitter. I sort of like step away from that. But yeah, you can follow me on you can follow me on Instagram and stuff. That's the best way and stuff. And yeah.
Amazing. Thank you very much. We'll upload those in the episode notes below so people can check it out. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michael. A real joy, and I wish you all the best with your journey.
I love what Chukwudi's father said to him. What is yours is yours. Essentially, what they are saying is when a moment, experience, job, etc. comes around, it will happen one way or the other. No one can get in your way, not even you. Prepare, do the work, but more importantly, let go. We can only control so much. Chukwudi encourages us to look deep within and recognize the opportunities sent our way, to seize these moments and recognize that we are worthy. So I'll leave you with this epic quote. Even the bad moments, the tough ones, I'm proud of them too. Those moments get you better, smarter, make you grow. Manu Ginobili. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.